Welcome back to Gruber Motor Company, the Gruber Morning Show. I'm Pete Gruber.
And I'm Zane Courtney.
And we are here today with a background picture from Red Rock country here in Arizona. I've said this many times. People come to our state for one of the 7 wonders of the world, the Grand Canyon. But you know what? Sedona, in my opinion, is much more interesting, much more diverse. And it was like my father went to the Grand Canyon. He says, wow, that's a big hole in the ground.
Yep.
But once you get past that observation, there are definitely some things to do at the Grand Canyon, especially if you're into hiking down into that thing. Have you ever done it?
No, I haven't gotten to be able to hike down into it. I've heard about people who will take like burros and donkeys and things like that, horses, they'll go into it. That's something I've always wanted to do, but it's on the list.
It's like a 7 to 10 mile hike to get down to Havasupai Village. And you know, going down is easy. It was getting back up that's tough. Yeah.
That's where the horse comes in.
Yes.
There's one thing there at the Grand Canyon. I don't know if it's the West Lookout or one of the lookout points, but it's actually, as you're looking down, it's further down to the ground than in the tallest building, the Burj Khalifa in Saudi Arabia.
That's
Is that
crazy.
right?
Yeah.
Wow. And you know, the temperature differences are severe too.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because it's all about elevation. You get down there and it's hotter than heck.
Yeah, you're like, it's almost like it scoops in all that heat, and then that elevation difference is
So it looks like
fascinating.
YouTube. Steve Rose joined us. Tesla has cut price of Model S and X about $5K.
Yes, we're going to talk about that.
Yeah. And by the way, any of you on, we've already talked to the TikTok audience. Much better production quality for you guys. And YouTube. Good question, Steve Rose. Where is my hat?
Where's your hat?
Guys, I have it right here. And what's happening is we're getting into summertime in Phoenix, and I only wear those in the wintertime. There's an interesting thing that happens when you shave off all your hair. By the way, I have hair, but I chose to shave it. It'd be interesting to see what it looks like if it ever grew out, because it's been 20 years since I've grown anything.
You're like,
out. It's
I don't
probably
need to
gray.
be as aerodynamic anymore.
Right. You know, I save an enormous amount of money on shampoo, conditioner, haircuts. My God, those are expensive nowadays. But anyway, the hat is here in case my head gets cold. You lose a lot of heat through your scalp when you don't have any hair. People that have hair don't realize what a great cushion that is. Like him, yes.
Yeah, I need to get a haircut. Go blow some money.
So, first news item here. Do you remember we were talking about the silliness that GM is engaging in with a hybrid Corvette?
Yep.
Right? And, you know, twice the maintenance, you know, we're trying to go emissions-free with transportation, and here we are, you know, keeping an ICE engine in a car that's partially EV without really any great performance gain. Well, you know what? We think that GM actually listened to our podcast, because guess what? They have announced a fully electric Corvette, which is going to be coming out in 2025.
That's fantastic news.
Sorry, 2026. It's going to be based on the Ultium skateboard, the structure for their EVs, and it will be unique to the Corvette, they're saying. But in the meantime, you will get a hybrid Corvette, and then by 2026, we'll start seeing a completely EV Corvette.
Is the Bolt running on the Ultium platform right now? Do you know anything about that?
You know, there's a list of cars that are running on that skateboard platform. The Cadillac Lyric, the Celestiq, the GMC Hummer, and the Chevy Silverado, Blazer, Equinox EV.
Yes.
They will all be built on this premium architecture unique for Corvette.
Gotcha. Because I knew that the Bolts and things were different, and the Ultium is kind of what the next cool big thing was, since they're introducing all of that with the Silverado and the Blazer. I'm still waiting on the Equinox. I was just telling the guys before the show, that's the one I'm more interested in, because that's going to be the functional family car that is going to be useful as an EV.
So this Corvette lineup that they're talking about, though, is going to take yet another direction that we're going to take, or I'm going to take issue with. I was disappointed in the fact they're going hybrid. Well, guess what? By 2026, they're also coming out with models that are 4-door and a crossover version. You know, I'm a sports car lover since, I don't know, for 30, 40 years now. And sports cars, what we expect, the people that love sports cars, is a 2-door convertible, you know, light, small, nimble car.
Yeah.
I
quick,
don't have
fast.
passengers. I don't expect passengers in my sports
No.
car. They're an annoyance. They don't like how fast I go. They don't like how fast I corner, any
It
of that.
adds nothing
Yeah.
to.
And I'm not into conversation when I'm behind the wheel of one of my muscle cars or sports cars enjoying the road,
It's not the point of the sports car. I will say, real quick, a Camaro 4-door. That would have been kind of cool.
That makes sense, yeah.
That makes sense because it's kind of boxy already, so it's like it kind of adds to that whole, we could extend it a little bit. And it already looks good as a coupe, but the Corvette, they had to do that to the Corvette.
But anyway, they're trying, I guess is the best thing that we can say about that. And they're trying to dial in their whole image in this EV world. I mean, you think about it. In 1995, they could have owned the electric vehicle revolution with the EV1.
Yep.
They blew it, They crushed all the cars except for maybe 2 or 3. And here we are, 20 years later after they crushed those, and suddenly EVs, they began to realize they are very popular, and Tesla took the lead.
Yeah.
Just grabbed it and took it away from them.
Hindsight's 2020. It could have been right thing, wrong time. Who knows?
Yeah. Couple questions there.
From Grace Hopper's Crunch on YouTube, went down and back in one day talking about the Grand Canyon.
Oh, okay. All right. Wow, that's pretty impressive. Very
Very
impressive,
cool.
actually, yeah. The time that I went down was with a group of people, and a girl that was with us injured her ankle. So we ended up having a decision to make, and we decided to take horses and I don't know if they're mules or donkeys or whatever it was. What was really interesting about that, though, it was fun being on horseback and not having to climb out, because I've done that as
Right.
well. But how close those things get to the edge,
yeah.
And you're just, you're assuming that they're going to be nimble-footed, but do we really know for sure, how many donkeys, horses, mules have fallen into the Grand Canyon because they weren't sure-footed? There's probably a statistic there we could look up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's funny. From James H. Hill on TikTok, currently working on my solid state build, and was wondering your thoughts on LLZO for electrolyte for lithium, lanthanum, zirconium oxide.
I don't know much about that, and that's something that we would have to research. But
I love that there's a guy already starting his own build on solid state.
my hat's off to you, James, for tackling a project like that. So you're doing a solid state build. Yeah, I would love to hear more about that.
Lithium, lanthanum. Lanthanum, I don't know if is a particularly abundant element, so it's not a it already doesn't sound like a particularly sustainable battery, but in limited use.
Yeah.
Kind of cool.
So Ford has a patent application that shows new ways that cars could be repossessed in the future if their owners don't make payments on time.
Because, that's the one technological development we needed right now.
Yeah, without a doubt.
That's the future of self-driving is self-impounding.
So they filed this patent August 21st, 2021, but it was published just last week. And they're going to use a system that would allow the car to lock out the driver. In other words, key, whatever is shut down. The owner or the lessor or whatever it is will no longer be able to get in the car if they don't keep up with payments. And at this point, the car can take some pretty drastic action, they say. It could autonomously drive itself to a spot where it's convenient for a tow truck to tow the vehicle. You know how sometimes the tow trucks or the repo man has a hard time getting the vehicle out because it's boxed in or whatever. Well, the car's going to make it easy. It's actually going to drive itself someplace or drive itself to the repo man's house, I suppose. That would be another way to do it, or business. It could also drive itself, as they say here, to the repo agency, lending institution, or even the impound lot. They open up the chain link fence and say, here's another one, let them in, close it back up. So the repossession system computer may communicate with, of course, the computers at the lending institution and to identify the car's market value. Now, here's another interesting side note. If it would cost more to repossess the car than the car's worth, the vehicle would even drive itself to a scrapyard. I'll tell you an interesting story about this. In 2017, we bought a bunch of Model S's, flood damage cars, and we had 2 cream puffs. One of them had like just under 600 miles on the odometer, a P100D, and we had a P90D Ludicrous with like 3,000 miles on the odometer. We decided, let's put these into a lease program, which really started our vehicle lease program. And we got some customers, and this particular customer took those 2 cream puffs, and everything was hunky-dory for about a year and a half. Payments would come through, consistently. Everything was fine. Cars were local, all of that. Suddenly we found out that the cars are in Atlanta, Georgia. Well, part of our contract was you can't take them out of the state without notifying us or getting approval, and we never approved that. So now we've got 2 assets that are, completely out of the state across the country. Well, things were okay for another 6 to 9 months or so, and then the payments stopped. And then the lessor was suddenly unavailable. He ended up having some personal difficulties and went to jail. So now we were without any sort of contact information. Who has our cars? The guy that was leasing them and making the payments had disappeared, was incognito. And another year goes by and we're thinking, how are we going to get our cars back? Where the heck, how are we going to find them? Then it occurred to us, we routed both of these cars. We got into the MCU, into the firmware, and lo and behold, we were able to track down the cars. One of them was sitting in a Safeway parking lot. Somebody was getting groceries, apparently. And then we were able to track them to the apartments that they were being parked at. And believe it or not, we were able to do the correct paperwork. The repo man came down, and we retrieved both of our cars. Now, you'd think the story would end, in our favor, but man, they were trashed. Oh my God! One of them, the P100D Ludicrous, the white seats, 600 miles when we gave it to them. To get something out of the trunk, they jimmied the front trunk.
What?
Bent the heck out of the hood. In fact, Richard's driving it now. It's his lease
That's
car.
that's yours?
Yes.
Yep. It's got a nice
no.
bright green hood and a nice bright green mirror to match.
Yeah.
Just one, though.
Yeah, just the one.
Oh, no, man.
But the whole point in this story, guys, is it's a different day and age. The technology is allowing things that we had never dreamed of, like locating the cars. And then, of course, retrieving them. So
dreams and nightmares, though. I mean, at some point, it's going to end up into a situation where, already Americans are making $600 a month is the average car payment on a car. They're stretching themselves pretty thin to make that happen. So, the amount of self-recalling cars is going to end up in a situation where you'll own nothing. But are we going to really be happy about that? I don't know.
Oh, James Hill answered the question earlier about that solid-state battery. He says it's ceramic.
Oh,
and then
neat.
he says, back to work. Peace, guys.
Hey, Glenn, thanks for joining us.
We understand.
Now, he was coming from TikTok, but be sure to check us out on Spotify as well. We're going there as well as any other platform you're watching us on right now. But seriously, we really appreciate you guys on Spotify. Once we get to 100 views, we're going to be able to start monetizing on there. So hopefully we'd be able to. Right? Is it monetizing or is it?
Yeah, 100 listeners will be able to do post ads.
Awesome.
And you know what monetizing does? It helps us pay for all of this stuff, the salaries, the equipment, the upgrades. So it's important to monetize.
You guys get paid? But yeah, no, so seriously join us on those other platforms. But thank you guys so much for joining us right now. We seriously appreciate it. Please keep leaving us your comments and questions. You guys run the show so much, and we love being able to get to all of your questions. So let us know where you're from, what your issue is, and we're happy to help as much as we can.
So one of the earlier questions or comments was that Tesla is continuing to cut prices of its high-end model cars. The Model S was dropped $5,000 or 5.2%. The Model X was dropped $10,000 or 9.1%.
Jeepers Christmas.
And this is the second time this year. Now remember, this year is pretty short. What are we into? 2 months?
Yeah,
maybe
right.
3, right?
Month 3.
The second time this year that the company has chopped prices. So the Model X dropped $21,000 from $120,000 to $99,000, and the Model S, meanwhile, has fallen from $104,000 to $89,000 since January 1st. Now, we were speculating. One of the things I said to the guys was, why is Tesla doing this? They've got the market. They have more demand than they have product. Why do price cuts? Why not just bank all of that margin so they can continue to expand and monetize their plant expansions and take care of all of their capital expenditures. Well, one of these speculations is maybe Tesla, maybe Elon really is trying to convert the world to electric vehicles and change transportations to emission-free. I mean, he's the richest guy in the world, so what's a bit more money, right? Is he the richest guy again now, by the way? I know it flip-flops. It depends on the value of the stock.
Currently he is, yeah.
He is, okay. But again, a tribute to Tesla, a tribute to Elon. They didn't have to cut prices. They've got the market. They've got the demand. They control it.
Yeah, no, their margins are better than anybody else to this day. They're still averaging 10 grand a vehicle in profit compared to the maybe 2 grand from all the other OEMs. But even cooler than that, they are still committing to building, I think it's a giga plant in Mexico, I believe, and that's a whole other news item. But because of that, all of that development, I mean, they're looking at having so much of their production in-house, including battery manufacturing, that's a really big one, that they're going to be able to save so much on cost to be able to actually distribute these vehicles. So I think you're exactly right. I think it's all about just making the movement.
Yeah.
And they're doing it in a way that's making everybody happy. They're increasing economic productivity and giving us products that are genuinely great.
So neither of these cars that we talked about, the Model S and the Model X price cuts, qualify for the U.S. federal tax rebates that are set to expire later on this month. Those only apply to SUVs priced below $80,000 and cars under $55,000. But still, it's likely to push, as they say, many fence sitters over the edge.
We got a great comment here from Exploration on YouTube, and this is actually a good point, that they could be dropping prices just to get rid of all the vehicles with Hardware 3.
Possibly,
Makes sense,
yeah.
because they've been working on Hardware 4, and they're trying to kind of, well, and a lot of it too, I'm sure, is because they've got all these 2012, 2015 vehicles that are coming out of warranty on their unlimited supercharging and all that stuff. And so I know Tesla's also working hard to try to get a lot of those back in possession. They've offered lots of money to people who still own those cars, just so that they can get those off the road and kind of switch things over to not only the new hardware with the new, I believe it's M4, Q4, whatever the new computer system is. But they also would be able to retrofit into the Hardware 3 models. So, all that to say, yeah, I think that's going to be part of the big transition that's coming up. So that was a great comment, Exploration. Thank you so much.
Steve Rose, by the way, gave us a bit of information here regarding the Grand Canyon. We were talking earlier about do people ever die at the Grand Canyon because the mules,
yes.
horses, or whatever they're riding, aren't sure-footed. But he says 12 people die annually taking selfies at the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, still?
Man.
I remember that was a problem like 8 years ago where people were doing stupid things on the edge and things like that. But to this day, that's tragic.
They have guardrails.
Right.
And
well,
if you
not
violate
everywhere.
the guardrail, and you're backing up, you could have a problem.
Yeah, right. From I'm at Skater. Oh, excuse me. From I'm at Skater is seating. I'll have to reword. I'll have to rename that on TikTok. From Indian Trail, North Carolina. What would the cost be for a module replacement for Model 3 battery or Model 3 pack serviceable? This is kind of a bit of a transition here out of our Tesla.
The Model 3 packs are serviceable. They're a bit different than the Model S modules, where you can have up to 16 of them in a car. They're longer. There are 4 long modules, but once you crack open the lid, you can get those out. We service them. We don't see many of them because those cars are typically under warranty. So it typically would be a salvage car or something that can't go to a service center. But yes, they are quite serviceable, and it can be done.
Very cool. From Grace Hopper's Crunch on YouTube, went to Tesla Stampede. So he went to Tesla Stampede and accidentally got better than estimated miles by keeping the battery warm in the freezing temps, by pulsing and regenning between 140 to 90 in those canyons west of Fredericksburg. And he's slowed way down after passing a deer standing just beyond a rise. Wow. That's crazy. But that's fascinating how much regen can actually keep that battery pack temperature modulated. That's interesting. Very cool. What is Tesla Stampede? Is that more of a rally specifically around Teslas?
I'm not sure.
I know I've heard about that, and I feel like a fake fan, but I can't remember what that is.
You know, there are so many Tesla events these days. There's one that's happening in California, I think in June. Musk is going to be speaking at this. She's one of the featured speakers, and there should be a lot of Tesla people there. Then I was watching one yesterday. One of our YouTube influencer contacts, Jessica Kirsch, was at a event. But yeah, there's so many Tesla events, I lose track.
Very cool. Oh, it was from our friend in North Carolina. I'm at Skatori's eating. That's the title.
Oh,
thank you.
okay.
Hey, if we ever come to North Carolina, let's go to Skatori's.
Very cool. That was an interesting name, yes. So if you, speaking just briefly again about this, why is Tesla dropping prices? There was a brief session in the Investor Day where Elon was talking about the desire for Teslas. And he was basically saying a lot of people want Teslas, but they can't afford them. It's more about affordability. And they didn't announce the sub $30,000 Tesla vehicle, but there was some hinting. When Franz got up there, he said, just be patient, basically. But something is brewing, something is up. And again, if Tesla's goal is to really do this EV conversion, I think they're going to be involved in creating something that beats the price of internal combustion engine cars, which will really rapidly increase the adoption rates.
Right now, they can't even beat the Bolt, unfortunately, because the Bolt is one of the most price affordable vehicles on the road. I say affordable in terms of budget EVs, and even that's pretty beyond the scope of what most people are willing to pay for a car. Especially right now, average is looking between 10 to 15,000. I mean, that's really just kind of a not beat or used car, but it's definitely something older.
Yeah.
If a new EV can come down to something like that and still be just as functional as an old, I don't know, not a Chevy Malibu, but something like that, maybe an old Corolla, something like that. That's gonna be really exciting to look forward to. It may not even happen within the next 5-10 years. That could be something even 20 years out, just because of the rate of scale and things like that. But as Elon pointed out, Tesla's already trying to do exactly that. I mean, they're trying to meet the demand that they've already got, and they've already have good plans to make that happen at an affordable rate, thanks to building them in Mexico. We'll hopefully see what happens with that, but yeah, looks like it's hopefully all coming together. I'd like to see more of it.
Yeah. So I've got a picture I'm going to throw up, guys. This is a 90-year-old gentleman in the Netherlands that made the transition to electric vehicles. His name is Henk. We don't have a last name, Henk. And but the caption is, "It's never too late to embrace new technology and buy your dream car."
My guy needed a new car, and by gosh, he got it.
Looks like he's got a Model Y there, and most likely manufactured at Giga
Oh,
Berlin.
sure, it might be a 3. Maybe a Model 3 there.
Yeah? Do you think it's lower?
But still. Wow, 90 years old. Hey,
Yeah.
get a new car. Do what you want. Very cool. Where was this? Oh, from the Netherlands. It still blows my mind, the adoption rate up there in the Netherlands, sort of the Scandinavian, just because of how cold it gets.
Yeah. Well,
you would
Norway,
think, right.
Yeah, I mean, I think their adoption rate for EVs is the highest in Europe. Mm-hmm. Could even be in the world. I think we had that on our podcast the other day, and it's one of the coldest countries in the world if you think about it.
I also find it ironic because it's between like Southern California and the Northeast up in the New York and kind of New England areas. They're also pretty big on EVs up there. Yeah. And those are vastly different environments, with the Northeast being as cold as it is, cold and wet. So it's just kind of funny because I think that shares somewhat of the same with the Netherlands and things like that.
So we got a TikTok question from Smuggler. Welcome back, Smuggler. Are you liking your new experience? We've got a better lens for you. We've got a microphone here now. We'll eventually have a green screen, but why are you looking at a piston? Well, it was an afterthought. What we did was we mounted the TikTok cell phone, extended it from the desk, and the aluminum 1/8-inch plate that I used bounces a bit. So we needed a counterweight. So since we didn't have anything, and I wasn't in a machine shop, we had to get going with our podcast, I took my paperweight, which is actually a piston out of a Harley clone motorcycle that was converted to an ashtray, and it's heavy enough. So Thursday we will have a appropriate or proper counterweight, but for now you guys are going to be looking at a piston.
All of our friends on TikTok, we love you so much, and thank you so much for dealing with our little construction phase while we get that going. But in the meantime, yeah, I hope you get to appreciate a little bit of that little Easter egg that's in fact a motorcycle piston. I did not even know that the first time I looked at it. I thought it was part of a film gear. I thought it was part of our camera equipment.
You know, I got that at a sale in our neighborhood here. A company went out of business or relocated. Let's put it that way. There was a divorce involved. You know how sometimes
Gotcha.
that, you know, all right. And it was a high-end motorcycle manufacturer. And I wish I could remember the name of it now. Bourget motorcycles.
Oh, yeah.
Right? They would take Harley platforms and just convert them over the top,
Yes.
kind of like Ferrari and Pagani, right?
Exactly.
Right? Well, anyway, the whole plant was opened one day, and it was a garage sale. They put a sign up on Deer Valley Road, and it said, you know, big sale. So I go in, and I'm looking around, and most of the good stuff was gone. You know, the machine shop equipment. I got there late, apparently. But they had a few of these pistons that somebody had polished and turned into ashtrays. So that's where that came from. It's a keeper.
That's
And
awesome.
It speaks to the old age of internal combustion engine days. So.
Relics of the past.
Yeah.
Well, they'll be around for a little while longer. Might as well use some of the good stuff.
So Thomas Curtis from YouTube, welcome. He says, hello from New Zealand.
Hey, good morning to you.
He says, my future is so bright, I gotta wear shades. We recommend that anybody watching our podcast, because it's the brightest in the podcast industry, you wear sunglasses like we do.
That's a great tagline. Mm-hmm. Guys, we gotta use that. For Gray's Operas Crunch on YouTube, the Investors Day meetup last week saw JK there, drove a 22 MYLR from SoCal. Oh, Model Y. Mm-hmm. Very cool.
Jessica Kirsch.
Yeah.
Oh, very cool.
Model Y long range. MYL.
Nice.
Yep. Jessica Kirsch, yeah, you know, she's promised that she would join our podcast. Actually, she was in town last week.
What?
Again, I saw a post on Facebook. Jessica, we got to get you in here. So when you're in town, take a little detour, come and join us here. It's Tuesdays and Thursdays, or just come to Gruber Motor Company. We'll do a quick video with you. But she is the most passionate Starbase attendee that on the planet, I think. She actually lives there and constantly out there with her camera, and she's an inspiration to those of us that are trying to do things in the alternative energy and emission-free world.
Tons of fun.
Yeah. So YouTube Shorts, Paul Bodybuilder, he asks, what about the Tesla house? Will it be on sale soon? He's from Windmore, Pennsylvania in the United States. Do you know anything about the Tesla house?
I don't know anything about the Tesla house. We should look into that a little bit. My guess is that it has something to do with Powerwall and pretty much all the different Tesla energy solutions that are coming into one place.
Okay. But Paul Bodybuilder from YouTube Shorts also comments the glasses are cool, man.
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate that. From I'm at Skatori's Eating, got it right this time. Is keeping a Model 3 for 10 or more years a good idea? Or should I upgrade it like iPhones and laptops? That's a great question.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, it depends on your risk aversion or your ability to handle risk. After 8 years, your warranty's gone. And, you know, the batteries in those cars are pretty brutal. Until something better comes along, which the future will definitely dictate. But, you know, it's up to you. Once your car's paid for, and you've got a nice Tesla, 10 years, you're getting into battery risks. And we'll talk about that a bit in tomorrow's podcast, which we'll announce here shortly. But anyway, I've got a news item. The questions keep streaming in. We'll insert a quick news item here.
But before we get to that, just real quick to add on to that, one of the best parts I think of this show is that you have that unique perspective of being someone who operates as you know, right to repair advocate and someone who's in the independent space to be able to repair these EVs. Transport Evolved just did a really great video talking about this new problem that we're going to see where all these older EVs are coming out of warranties and the replacement costs or the the repair costs on those is astronomical because it's fewer but more expensive components. And it's something we talk about a lot on this show. So definitely go and check out some of our older episodes whenever we talk about some of that sort of thing. And keep watching because we're probably going to keep bringing that up.
All right, so
Find us on Spotify.
yeah, during the Investor Day, Tesla's Investor Day last week, they made an announcement that they're finally going to a higher voltage, low voltage battery, the 48 volts instead of 12 volts.
That's pretty big. That's a big deal.
It is. The problem with it is going to be that there isn't much product available that runs on 48 volts. So it was a wake-up call to the aftermarket industry and to the automotive product manufacturers. They're going to have to make products in 12 volt configurations and 48 volt in order to keep business with companies like Tesla. The obvious things are going to be things like headlights, audio systems, solenoids, door locks, anything that runs off low voltage DC. But doing a bit of research, 12 volts wasn't there during the early days of autos. It was actually 6 volts. And once I read that, I remembered, I'm an old guy, by the way. I used to work on old car radios in the 60s, for example. And there were a lot of 6 volt devices in cars. 6 volts was the common voltage up until the 1950s or so. And then they switched over to 12 volts because cars began to have a lot more electrical stuff in them that required more current. Things like seat motors, for example. And 6 volts just wasn't adequate to deliver enough of enough energy in cars, so they went to 12 volts. Somewhere along the way, 12 volts stayed since 1950 as a standard in automotive batteries and in ICE vehicles. That's the only battery you got because it cranked your starter motor. And then, of course, Tesla comes along and the EV, people start cranking out cars. And because of the proliferation of low voltage accessories that go in a car, they kept 12 volts. Nobody was going to rock the apple cart and create a different voltage. Now Tesla is doing it. Again, the aftermarket people now are going to be scrambling to make 48 volt products that will go in cars to keep the business. But what are the advantages of 48 volts? Let's talk about that for a moment. In the world of electricity, voltage and current is inversely proportional. So if something that operates on 12 volts is drawing 10 amps, if you go to 24 volts, it becomes 5 amps. 48 volts, it's going to be 2.5 amps. Now the reason that makes a huge difference is wire size or thickness is based on your amperage. A 10 gauge wire is good for 30 amps, for example. A 16 gauge wire is good for like 7 amps. So I might have got that wrong. Darn it. Okay, but anyway, inversely proportional. So they're going to have smaller wiring harnesses in cars now. And there are other parts. Fuses don't need to be as big, the amperage. Relays, contactors, less current passing through them. So there will be a cost reduction in a 48 volt system. The thing that I'm curious about is, and I couldn't find it yet, who's going to be making 48 volt batteries? Because you're still going to have a storage method unless Tesla is actually going to now feed 48 volts from the main propulsion battery, which they did with the Roadster early on, but found that to be a problem because the area or the sheet that they were drawing the 12 volts from in the Roadster was being worked overtime, and it would fail before the rest of the sheets did. So now maybe we're back to a DC to DC converter. We're going to take the 400 volts, step it down to 48 instead of 12 volts. So those are things that will be revealed here, or maybe already are, and I just didn't find it. But there are some definite advantages to going to a 48 volt system. One thing that Tesla did in 2021 was they finally figured out we've got an EV. The main propulsion is based on lithium-ion battery technology, but they were using lead-acid batteries for their 12-volt system. Absorbent glass mat, which are maintenance-free, but still there are lead plates with an electrolyte, sulfuric acid, in the batteries. In 2021, they finally switched over to lithium-ion 12-volt batteries. And now we're going to 48 volt, and they will also be, according to the Investor Day, lithium-ion batteries. So there will be less resistive loss and less cost in the components. Initially, that may be offset by the fact that nobody's really making 48 volt accessories for cars yet, but that will, I'm sure, begin to solve itself as the volume kicks into high gear for this. And you know, I can't imagine that the other EV manufacturers aren't going to follow suit, because why would GM come out with a 24-volt system and then obligate the aftermarket people or the OEMs that make the accessories in cars to make 24-volt product?
Right.
The scale of economies aren't there, and the higher the volume, the lower the cost.
And it seems like there's an exponential rate of increase that allows you to do that, because as you said, it takes smaller wires to be able to transmit that amperage. And so because of that cost saving on the actual material, everybody's going to want to switch over to the 48 because Tesla already made it happen. And I love that you mentioned the DC-DC converter for that exact reason, because that was a big news item that you guys had talked about a couple of weeks ago, I think, more than a few weeks ago. So it's exciting that it's like all coming really physically together.
Yeah, and you know, the other voltage systems in vehicles have been around a bit longer, but they were obscure. For example, the military used to use 24 volts DC. John Deere apparently uses a 48 volt system in their row crop planters. So the going to 48 volts will mean that smaller wiring looms, as they call them, or the wiring harnesses, they'll be able to be lower, or a higher voltage, lower current, and smaller gauge wires, cheaper. So there's some distinct advantages there. Be interesting to see how this all pans out. We've got a bunch of questions now. YouTube Shorts, Paylow. Can USB-C power delivery run on 48 volts? Yes, it can. YouTube, JM, what are the risks? Well, you know, 400 volts, you have tremendous risks, because it's the type of voltage that can cause electrocution. 24, 36, and 48 volts, you can barely feel it. So I hope that we're not going to be obligated to use, PPE stuff and gloves and face shields and guys with hooks behind us if you're working and changing a headlight on a car.
You know, that was something that Transport Evolved had talked about in their last video regarding, the repairs and things like that, when it comes to these high voltage systems, you need specific training. There's only a couple people at each dealership that actually are capable of doing that. And so that's another reason why the repairs on EVs right now are so expensive. So being able to create an infrastructure when it comes to these systems that actually just makes it easy to work with, even though it's high voltage, it would be tremendously useful. Palo also asked, what sort of accessories use 12, 24, and 48 volts? I can't think of anything besides USB chargers.
Yeah, well, the little 12-volt socket that you have below your console, which is actually an offshoot from the old days when you used to be able to smoke in a car, and smoking was common. You had a cigarette lighter that plugged into that little 12-volt socket. Since then, it has become more useful for charging devices, cell phones, radar detectors, that type of thing. So there'll be a whole industry evolving that will use a higher voltage now for those types of devices.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. And I wonder if items will even be able to have some sort of internal step down. I'm not totally sure how it's going to work, but we've got so much infrastructure around the 12-volt system already. Sure. I mean, think of all the little doodads and things that people get. I mean, myself included. I've got a couple of things that I plug into that 12-volt charger just right by my console to charge my phone and things like that. I can't even imagine how many things are out there. We'll see if there's kind of, little modifications you can make to those, or if there's going to be another step down even from the 48-volt system so that it only draws 12.
So Thomas Curtis from YouTube says power over Ethernet is 48 volts, correct?
Wow.
USB is 5 volts. Chips use 5 volts, for example. And Tesla makes their own stuff. The 48-volt DC architecture is also not new in terms of telephone. We talked about that in the last podcast. Central offices, for example, for many years without backup power, used to use wet cells, 48 volts DC. and that's the voltage that's going to your house. The ring voltage is higher. But somebody mentioned in the last podcast, yeah, I hooked an LED to my phone jack, and I was able to get light for free because he was using the central office or the phone company's power to power that LED.
Ah, cheeky.
Now, a question from Smuggler on TikTok. He says, if they use a converter, a DC to DC converter, to create the 48 volts, don't they run the risk of draining the main battery to zero if the vehicle is parked for extended periods of time? Tesla learned something with the Roadster, and which routinely gets bricked, as they call it, which if you do run it to zero, it will continue to drain because it's keeping thermal management alive, the VMS module alive, functions in the car. With the later model Teslas, they put contactors inside that open up at a certain point, and it disconnects the battery from any kind of drain. So no, there's really no concern there because they'll continue with that successful protection system in the main battery pack.
Yeah, and it's cool because you mentioned that they, I think part of that protection system, if I'm right, and tell me if I missed something, but they also, in the newer model Teslas, they literally have the breakers flip themselves after a certain period of time in order to avoid, the contactors in order to avoid that breaking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they open up. We've had Model S's sitting outside here that we bought at auction for 3 years, and when we fire them up, the battery is fine. It's like storing the cells on a shelf somewhere in your warehouse.
That's fascinating.
So YouTube Shorts, Paul Bodybuilder, another question, will you ever do a review on a 2023 Hyundai Ioniq 5?
If we had one.
There are so many YouTubers that that's their specialty. They review vehicles. We're more into the service side of things and the broader, and Tesla, of course. We may branch into that eventually, but for now we're confining ourselves to the format that we've become successful with.
Tell you what, I saw, not a full lot, but I saw several Ioniq 5s sitting in a Hyundai dealership just down the street from where I live. Mm-hmm. And it brought me so much joy to know that you could just theoretically, if you had the money, go and get one. Because they're gorgeous cars. Should we keep going with
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
let's do it. From John, and thank you guys so much for sending these in. These are tons of fun. From John L. Lidstrom on YouTube, in terms of Tesla hardware, when changing the major module, so a motor, controller, etc., do you have to digitally add it to the onboard computer? What software do you use for that? Maybe kind of walk through a little bit of that process.
Yes. The old days of internal combustion engine service, you could change a door handle, boom, that was the end of it. You could replace your engine. It fired right up.
That's
with
the
these
best
EVs,
part, arguably.
Yeah, these are computers on wheels, and they go out and they poll all the devices that are on the CAN system, and they want to make sure that everything is in alignment. So yes, changing major components like that, you definitely have to reload firmware. You have to acquaint the firmware with this new device, and make sure that it's sanctioned in the car. It's not as easy as it used to be. Even changing certain modules, you have to reload firmware. How do you do that? Well, you have to have a subscription to Toolbox software. If you're really into coding, you could do some black screen stuff and write your own GUI version of those types of tools. We played with that, and believe me, it's not cost effective. If Tesla makes that Toolbox version subscription available to you, it's much cheaper to spend a few $1,000s every year for that than to try to write your own translation software.
And I love that you mentioned that it's literally like computers on wheels. For anybody who's built computers, it's exactly like that. If you have to put in some kind of new, let's say you change even your coolant. Let's say you go from, well, I have a passive, or not passive, I've got an air cooler right now, but if I were to say put in an AIO, if I were to put in something like that, you'd have to plug everything in, and then you would have to reload your firmware to do exactly that. You have to tell the computer, hey, this thing is in now, it's all good.
So we've got a Facebook visitor who's been here before, Chuck Longloy. He asks, where can I tap into the 12 volts in the rear view mirror area for my radar detector? He has a 2018 Model 3 long range. Is there a 12 volt feed to the cabin spot lights? I wish I could answer that for you, Chuck, but we don't see that many Model 3s because they're under warranty typically. I don't know the answer to that question. whether there's a 12-volt feed up there somewhere. What I would look for in that area is a cabin light. There's your 12 volts, and then you could tap into that.
Mm-hmm. Smuggler on TikTok's got a couple things to say. He's like, whoa, Pete isn't wearing his Google headgear.
Well, I have it. All right, let me show it to you guys.
Nearby.
I brought it.
There we go.
It's getting to be summertime in Phoenix, and my head is not as cold as it used to be because the temperature's improving here.
We had our February fake out, as we like to call it, but yeah, it's always kind of nice to go back and forth. He also says, I haven't produced a live show, but can the camera phone be turned sideways? That might be a conversation.
Yeah, Richard, the TikTok phone, if we turn it sideways, it doesn't follow the TikTok format.
I don't know if it'll...
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we turn it sideways, it's not going to adjust the display for the viewers. So it's going to remain in the 9:16 format instead of going to 16:9. And basically the person viewing will either have to turn their phone sideways, which will mess with their setting, mess with the viewing. It won't work out well.
Yeah.
So it crops the image.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. YouTube, Steve Rose. Welcome back, Steve, again. EV conversion magazines like EV Builder's Guide are starting to emerge. Very exciting. You're right. I read one this morning. We're embarking on a project, by the way, that is going to convert instead of an ICE car to EV, an EV to EV.
Oh.
And that's as much as I want to say about that. Yeah. But it's amazing how quickly that whole cottage industry is beginning to blossom and grow. You're right. Good stuff. Bill in Arizona, TikTok. Do you get people asking to have the 12-volt battery changed? Oh my God, Bill, all the time. During Investor Day, Elon was standing up on stage, and behind him was a picture of the 12-volt battery and the new 48-volt conversion. And they were talking about, or the heading under the 12-volt battery was for your lifespan, not on your life. In Arizona, people weren't getting 2 years out of those batteries, and many of them were going with an aftermarket lithium-ion 12-volt battery replacement because of that. It has a lot to do with the environment. A lot of heat is not good for batteries, and there's certainly no thermal management on a 12-volt battery inside a Tesla in the front.
Chuck says, thank you for acknowledging his comments. Smuggler says, well, it was a thought. Hey, we appreciate your thought, and it's a great thought. So thank you so much for sharing it with us. From Gaze Kick on Instagram, or Gaz Kick, I believe it is, Gaz Kick. I work for Tesla UK. Your workshop is amazing.
It is pretty cool, yes. And, if you're ever in the United States, come visit us. And if you watch our videos, and the guys are constantly doing videos in the shop, that's probably the best way to see how our shop is evolving. Chuck Langloy, or Longloy, gives us a thanks. So I've got a news item for you here. And this one was kind of disappointing. In Jackson, Mississippi, a bill that would restrict the sale of electric vehicles in Mississippi is on its way to Governor Tate Reeves' desk. We're talking about this NADA lobbying that has been going on since the last century. NADA is the National Auto Dealers Association. And they were able to successfully prevent a manufacturer of autos from selling direct to consumers for many, many decades in the last century. And then Elon comes along and says, I'm not going to allow the car dealerships used to selling ICE vehicles that know nothing about EVs to sell my vehicles because they're not going to get the same attention as those ICE vehicles that they're used to. So he really bucked the system and began to try to sell direct, and a number of states tried to shut him down. Arizona was one of them. They wouldn't allow him to sell his cars here in Arizona. You had to do some convoluted thing where you ordered it online in California, then had it shipped to the border, and it got really silly. This whole NADA thing has outlived its usefulness. Car dealers are on their way out. They are not going to survive. They make their money on service. They don't make it on car sales anyway. So here we are now in Jackson, Mississippi, with the rest of the country finally coming around to the fact that we live in the information age. People buy things online. When you need something, when I need something, I go online, I go to Amazon, OfferUp, TikTok, eBay, wherever, and I enjoy the convenience of being able to buy a $5 item and have it shipped to my place of business within a day or two without having to drive anywhere. So anyway, this House Bill, 401 they call it, passed through the Senate Thursday last week, and it got signed into law. The EV manufacturers can no longer sell vehicles directly in the state of Mississippi. Now, what this means, of course, is they don't have dealerships set up there, Lucid, Tesla, and they're not going to go to a Ford dealership and convert them into an EV sales organization overnight, because this law will get repealed. This is not going to stand. So anyway, there's another example of myopic thinking. It says the bill passed the Senate by a vote of 38 to 14.
Wow.
Again, it just boggles. I mean, it's a head shake.
You know, they're trying to do something, I guess, as a retaliation to the whole movement and something. It's just counterproductive, because now you're still forcing people to buy one thing over another. So it's an authoritarian move that's frustrating, considering, you know, where it's coming from. But to your point, exactly that. Dealerships are already on the way out anyway. It's kind of ironic, because it's not. I don't know how that's even going to stop Tesla from selling there, since they don't have dealerships. You know, they have service centers, but.
And this was not an official admission, but do you remember when Tesla was looking here in the Southwest to build a gigafactory? And there were a number of states under consideration, even California, Nevada, Arizona, right? And at that point in time, Arizona had this restrictive NADA, law in effect that Tesla was not allowed to sell their vehicles here. We believe that the reason Tesla did not locate in Arizona, which now all the other, a lot of the EV manufacturers are, because it's a very favorable climate. There's a lot of infrastructure here. There's a labor pool here that is highly skilled in high tech. It's like another Silicon Valley. The reason they didn't locate here is because of that. And it went to Reno, Nevada, you know, out in the boonies somewhere. There's a price to pay for allowing this kind of senseless lobbying to continue, which is not in the best interest of the public that these laws are supposed to protect. There were a lot of studies done, even back then when Tesla was trying to locate somewhere, that over 80% of the population would prefer to buy directly from the manufacturer. Nobody likes driving down to a car dealership and playing the let's make the deal game, sitting in a room somewhere and having the sales rep go, well, let me talk to the manager, and then have them tag on all kinds of additional costs if you've worked your best deal. People don't like that. People like a price, they like a fair price, and they like to buy a predictable product. So anyway, I'm on a rant here.
Hey, it's a good rant. Hey. Well, and maybe to cap it off, a quote from Smuggler here. Couldn't they put a service center, quote, car lot that stocks nothing but as a delivery point? They kind of do that with Service Center. Rivian actually does that as well.
You know, they would play all kinds of games, Smuggler. For example, you would go to the mall here during this time when Tesla had, but it was brilliant. Instead of going to a dealership somewhere in, you know, Glendale, Arizona here or somewhere on Camelback where nobody really hangs out, they went and put the showrooms into the high-end malls where the affluent people visited Scottsdale, right?
Yep.
And because it was a luxury car, the average guy wasn't going to be able to afford a $100,000 plus car. So it was a brilliant marketing move to go to that location. But what they would do in those showrooms is they couldn't talk price, they couldn't take your order, but they could educate you on what the vehicle is. And that was far better than going to a dealership and having some commission-breathing sales rep breathing down your neck, trying to get you to make a deal. So what's it going to take to get you into this car today?
Yeah,
Who
right.
wants to hear that crap, right?
You don't even need to have that conversation anymore. It's good riddance, I say. It's just, yeah.
I'm sure Mississippi will turn around.
We're at 1 hour.
All right, 1 hour.
Man, time flies by when you're having fun.
All right.
A couple of great more comments here from David Hartline, actually. I learned about EVs in this hour watching you guys more than any place else. Thank you and keep up the great work. David, I appreciate
Thank
that.
you, David. David is actually with BenPack.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, he's involved in their social media team, and yeah, great company. They are working on developing products for the EV service centers.
Oh, very cool.
So
Because you guys just did a collaboration with them, didn't you?
we did indeed, yes. They actually they featured a battery lift that allows a 1,200-pound battery pack to come out of the car, and then for service activity that an EV shop would do.
Very cool.
By the way, David, there's another thing I wanted to share with you guys, and I found this out. Tesla does not service the battery packs or open them up at their service centers. Turns out that Lucid does. And
Really?
one of the things that they do, if they suspect there is water inside a Lucid battery pack, they are able to put it on a table of some sort and put a hole in the bottom of the pack, tilt it down a bit, and see if any water comes out to confirm that there is fluid or water contamination inside that pack. The AS4000, I believe, battery lift system that BenPack provided us actually has a capability of adjusting all four corners and leveling it out. What we're going to do is start using that for this very application. If we suspect that there is fluid inside a pack, we're going to use your leveling system and create a intentional downslope to see if any of the fluid comes out. So that's going to be another selling feature for you guys, because I think that's the future. Rather than open the pack, why not check to see if there is some water contamination or fluid contamination before you open it up? And then, of course, to close it, you thread it, you put a plug in there, and end of story.
You would think that, Monroe Live I'm sure they had something about this, but you would think that would already be in the packs, wouldn't they? There's some slight angle just to have a little drain on the bottom. I mean, heck, they already thought to put drains in the Frunks and in the Rivian and the F-150 Lightning.
There's another advantage that apparently Lucid has. A Tesla battery pack, all 1,200 pounds of it, has a lid on top. And for people like us that open that up to service it, it's a nightmare to take that off. There's a Rich Rebuilds video where he's drilling two holes. He's got the lid partially pulled up. He drills two 1-inch holes in it. Then he ties a tow rope with hooks into those holes. He puts it up on his car lift, and he starts lifting up the car lift to rip that top off. Well, you've destroyed the lid, of course, and if you were going to repair that battery, you couldn't, and you can't buy lids. We've been trying from Tesla.
But it is fun to watch.
We have to do body work. So we have to carefully chip all the way around that pack, and that's part of what drives the labor up so high. Turns out Lucid has a gasket. You remember the old days of working on internal combustion engine cars, and you've got a valve cover? And when you want to get inside that valve cover, you simply unscrew a bunch of 7/16 bolts, and then you've got a cork gasket that prevents the oil from leaking out and closes that system. Well, apparently Lucid in their battery system has a gasket system. And Tesla, if you're listening, make it easy for us guys out here in the independent space that are repairing these packs. A gasket would reduce the cost for the customer and make our life so much easier. And probably your people in Lathrop that are rebuilding the battery packs.
Yeah. Help us help you. Help me help you. That's awesome. I think we got just the last couple of comments here to wrap the show out today. Bill Wood says, that's where I fell in love with Tesla, was at the mall.
At the mall, yeah, exactly.
It's a great place to be able to just see what it's about. And I think the overwhelming success of Tesla's model, I think, is proof that, hey, there's some things are changing and it's for the better. So fun stuff. Bobby W540 on TikTok sent us some gifts. Very nice.
We've got barbells, cat paws, and ice cream cones.
I'm trying to mentally interpret that.
Well, for both of us, yeah.
That's it.
Well, they're coming to us virtually.
Oh,
we have
fantastic.
To pretend. It's kind of like my granddaughters, when you have a tea party, there's really no tea in that on the cup, but you're pretending that you're...
Darn it, it's the best one.
Yes, it is. Very refreshing. I prefer this one over this one, actually, Emily.
And Grace Hopper's Crunch.
Yes.
Yeah, wow. A Giga Phoenix would have been awesome. What a missed opportunity. Need to ID all those needed Tesla people out of AZ. Get their comeuppance. I mean, hey, you know, it's a missed opportunity. And I think that the people who are leaning in that direction, specifically in, I think, Texas, Mexico, Berlin, China, they're going to do well by themselves, I think, as they continue to make this happen.
Well, we've got some spillover news items. We'll catch you up on those Thursday. I have one other announcement that I want to make. This Wednesday, tomorrow, we are going to start for the Tesla Roadster owners a specific podcast geared for them.
You want to pull it out? Pull out the Roadster there?
Oh, this is the next generation Tesla
mode.
Roadster with an autograph from Franz von Holzhausen, the lead designer at Tesla. We got that at the Peterson Auto Museum. So the Roadster that we're going to be doing a special podcast for is the Legacy Roadster, the one that was released in 2008 through 2011 in the US and 2012 in Europe. The cars are now going on 15 years old. There's a lot of conjecture and concern about will Tesla continue to support the cars? What are the challenges to keep them running? These are all the kind of topics that we're going to cover. And we're also going to have guests from time to time. Some of the original design engineers, probably virtual Zoom type, comments or sessions. And it is time we feel that this small group gets some attention. These were people that were the early adopters. The first early adopters actually were in 1995 during the GM EV1 release. These are people that in light of the fact that everything was internal combustion engine, took a chance and said, maybe an electric vehicle has some merit, other than the golf cart that they would ride around on Sunday afternoons, right?
Yeah.
Golf game, right, with their buddies. And of course, that went away in 1996 when GM crushed them all. Then Tesla comes out with a Tesla Roadster. Interesting specifications, performance over the top, bright colors, Lotus Elise body with true sports car look, lines, and DNA. And we've talked to many of these original purchasers of the vehicles. They fully understood that Tesla could go bankrupt at any moment in time, that they were on their they were gasping for air, but they made a commitment, many of them, to put a down payment on a car that they may never see. We're talking about early adopters that were that generous and willing to risk. And then, of course, after the car came out, it was the only thing on the road that was electric vehicle, to speak of anyway. And they hung in there. They hung in there with Tesla. They hung in there through all of the gyrations that they went through, the production hell, the, again, continued concerns about bankruptcy. And mind you, somebody that owns an expensive car like a Tesla Roadster, even back then in the day, to hang in there was pretty remarkable because look at how many manufacturers have gone under. And, and people have lost their ability to continue to service the cars. Which, by the way, is another thing that we're going to talk about, is the amount of support that Tesla has provided for the Tesla Roadster. So anyway, it is not limited to only Tesla Roadster owners, but that is where we've been focusing our invitations. Any of you that would like to join, it may be informative for you, but it is definitely a historic car that deserves some attention, and the owners deserve some love. So we will see you Thursday at 8:30 a.m. And for those of you that want to join us tomorrow, the Tesla Roadster podcast is at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which is another deviation for us. We're going to see if later in the day increases the audience, because we figure that most of you in the U.S. at least are working during our morning podcasts.
Gotcha. And if we didn't get to your comment today, I know there was like one or two that we'd missed. Don't worry, we're going to get to those first thing on Thursday. So please keep leaving comments. We always will do our best to get to those. And we're going to try to get to these most recent ones on Thursday. Again, 8:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time on all the same platforms you've been watching on today: YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter.
Oh, real quick, that is about to change, though. I think daylight savings is in a couple days.
Oh, never mind.
Oh, we need to talk about that too, yeah.
And Spotify, especially Spotify. Be sure to check us out. We love to be able to see you all there. But until then, we're going to get to see you on Thursday, 8:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, and the new Roadster Show at 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time.
Wednesday.
On
tomorrow.
Wednesday.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you soon.